It can, it doesn't do it. Well, it's that if you, that's where it's at right now. See, if you have the opportunity to enter the zone of a mile perimeter of your existing border. Well, it's been a pretty much standing agreement, and we've asked for boundary agreements. We have boundary agreements with 8 out of the 9 surrounding communities. Oh, I'm sorry. So what communities typically do is they'll sign an agreement to say, like, this is where our boundaries end, this is where yours end. And it's been an understood situation that is down Main Street. That's where Elkin's boundaries would end and ours would be Main Street. Well, it's just the way it is. I mean, you can spend a lot of time looking at it, and I've done it. And that's the way it is right now. So, why do you think Elkin comes further behind Main Street? Well, mine used to be too, but I wasn't in Elkin. So, are you in Elkin? In city limits? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, on that proposal, it's just a concept that shows that one kid rolled over me. Well, well, you asked me what the specifics are. Those are what they are, and that's what I imagine. What if you're not really in Elton's boundaries, and you're not really in Sugar Groves. You're in between. So you have an Elburn address. You have an Elburn address. That doesn't mean Elburn. So what you have to do is contact your Elburn council, and they'll tell you exactly the same thing. There are no official agreed upon boundaries. It's been an understanding that it's Main Street. If it's 100 yards north of Main Street or 100 yards south of it, and that hasn't been how it works. Well, Main Street is about a mile and a half. That's the right of the village. And Elburn's right to sign an agreement with Sugar Grove.
Yeah, but my understanding was Elburn wanted to come a little. Start with
the agreement, they have to agree to something. Why would we want all the way to CB Road? That's on the other side of Main Street. So, and that's not okay. You could go. Well, this is part of it tonight. I'm just letting the way it is now. What you guys can do, if you want to motivate Elburn to do something, go to Elburn. That's how you do it. With me, I'd be fine. I'm sure I'd be fine with the agreement being at Main Street, where it's been pretty much agreed upon. Here or there, if you either way. It's just the way that, the rules for villages and townships. I just have a resident. But I've been involved with this since. This would be, I mean, personally, that representatives as far back as 2008. And for whatever reason, that agreement has not been reached. Now, I wasn't part of it. I don't know why. All I can tell you is there is no. Now, we currently have 4 agreements with everybody surrounding us except Elton. So that's between, and I've gone to some of the, I went to some of the Elton meetings and talked to some of the administrators in 2019. And they did the same thing. You guys had the CMAP. They just redid it in 2019. It's the same thing that this is, which says what Elton's goals are and what the community wants and how they're going to grow and all that. If you pull that up, you might see that those projected boundaries past Main Street on our side. I don't know. But they're there. Yeah.
Good, how are you?
Anyone? Nope. All yours.
Let's wait.
Everyone else, yeah, just replaces. He's coming home Sunday morning. Since then, he did not want to try to deal with the airport and stuff the day after.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I said, well, you're lucky you're not here, because it rained on I said, no. I wouldn't. Hi, nice to meet you.
I got here like 10 minutes. Right? Like, computers. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I take that for you. I know. Oh, yeah. Do you have a fancy call your office? Yeah, yeah.
I'll give one to Sean
You
too.
give me one? Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what side of the it is. And another thing, you need a lot more CO2 to produce an electric vehicle. A lot more energy involved, especially in batteries. Tons and tons and tons of one battery. Billions of I just said, well, how you doing, man? I stopped at the booth and popped it up, you know?
How are you?
I'm trying to remember, were we beside you the last time, or, yeah?
We jumped the seats.
Oh, maybe. Well, the next time we go to
Hey,
that,
how are you?
we will not sit in front of that thing, and again, we couldn't hear anything that, there was like that. Oh, I, well, it's not good, you know, so you didn't know it's yeah.
Sitting next to the, well, yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, there's I figure I'd look around, like, notice a couple people I know. That's what I was hoping for.
No, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't think we should go to Brown. Brown doesn't. Brown.
Like a little book about my experiences like
What is this? Oh, comic cards? I don't have anything right with them. Oh,
I got you covered.
thank you. So it's counting to give you they probably
Yeah, right, yeah.
Anyone hear me? Right at the back? Oh, no. I'm just gonna have to ask everybody's attention here, please, because we're just about to get started. I think now everyone can hear me. Great. Is that too loud? No, it's good. Okay, great. Okay, we're right at time. So welcome everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming out here. My name is Manisha, and I am with Design Workshop. And Design Workshop is the planning consultant that is partnering with the village and CMAP as the lead consultant for the planning process. We were hired by CMAP to facilitate this comprehensive plan update for the village of Sugar Grove. And as facilitators, our job here is to really define your community's priorities for the long-term vision of Sugar Grove. And for some of you that may not be familiar with CMAP, it is our region's comprehensive planning organization. And they're in the process of implementing the ONTO 2050, which is the long-range plan to help 7 counties and about roughly 284 communities in Northeast Illinois really plan for a holistic vision into the future. And Jacob's side here, oh, there he is. He and Michael are representing CMAP here today, and they will talk a little bit about the ONTO 2050. And accompanying me here is Sarah Egan and Ashley McKnight, both planners with Design Workshop. What we would like to do today is start with an overview of the 2050 plan. Then we'll do a project overview where we're today. We'll have some engagement snapshots, and what that is an overview of who we've heard from and who's participated in the planning process thus far. And after that, we're going to do an overview of the future land use planning. We'll identify the plan vision and then go through the priorities for the next 10 to 15 years. Then we will ask for your support or not on those priorities as we move further into the planning process. At the end, just so that we're clear, when we ask for, we'll be doing live polling at the end of the session, and it is not a vote. We as planners have to make sure that we, we weigh in the development opportunities and constraints against a viable future. And it is an opportunity for all of us to better understand your priorities as we're moving forward into a draft plan. And this will be an opportunity for you all to provide input. And some of you have been here in the past 2 community workshops, and some of you may be coming here for the first time. So welcome. And this will be an opportunity for you all to emphasize and ratify the vision plan as we've laid out so far. So our focus tonight will be on the future land use and future transportation investments that are critical components of the comp plan, but they're not the only components of the comp plan. The comp plan, when it comes out, will also include policy recommendations to guide future policy decisions and implementation strategies, and also provide a framework for decision-making and for allocating funding for the future for some of these projects. And as I mentioned before, we'll conclude today with a Q&A. And just so that you all can note that any questions that are related to specific development proposals are not something that we can provide here tonight or even comment on tonight. Yeah. Mhm. So tonight is the third workshop in the comprehensive plan update process. We will take all the input that we received from you all. There has been a great turnout today, so thank you all for coming. And we will take all the input that we received today, amend and refine our recommendations, and at the end of the process, provide a draft plan to CMAP and the village as the final deliverable in spring. So I'd like to invite Jake here to talk a little bit about the On to 2050.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jake Side. I'm a senior planner at CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. Quick show of hands. Before tonight, who had heard of CMAP before? Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Most folks don't know about regional planning. It's just, not something that's on people's radar. We talk about local planning a lot, at the municipal level, but CMAP, we're the group that works with all 284 municipalities and all 7 counties around Chicago. And we really are representing Northeastern Illinois, right? So we've got Chicago in the name, but we've got really strong representation from Kane County. The CMAP board actually has tremendous geographic diversity with strong representation from King County. So this is our On2 2050 plan. We want to talk about how this plan guides the village's comprehensive plan. So On2 2050 came out in 2018. And this is really that regional land use plan for the entire region, right? So we've got 3 major things to talk about here. The first is inclusive growth, growing our economy through opportunity for all, resilience. When we talk about that, we're just talking about, preparing for change as the economy changes, as land use changes, as transportation changes. And the third item there, the third theme is prioritize investment, because we want to be really careful about how we target our resources to create the maximum benefit here in Sugar Grove and in the surrounding area. As I said, our plan was approved by the CMAP board with strong representation from this part of the region. But the big takeaway that we want to have for you today is that our plans at the regional level are really complementing your plans at the local level and vice versa, right? So we're trying to look for those areas of overlap so we can find areas to do better land use planning, better transportation, and better economic development. And our role here is as a trusted advisor. So we've been working with municipalities throughout the Northeastern Illinois area for quite some time. We've worked with great consultants like Design Workshop and with municipalities here along the Fox River and throughout Kane County. So we really want to bring that experience and know-how in the work we're doing with you all. And I think I'll turn it back to you, Manisha.
So as Jake just mentioned, our hope here through this comprehensive planning process is to move this dial forward so that Sugar Grove and the residents and the area can also participate in the key metrics that Jake just talked about. So what you see here is a snapshot of who we've heard from so far. What you will also see here is a breakdown on how residents and others have communicated with the planning team. So we've had workshop participants, we've had steering committee members, and meetings. We've had online survey participants as well as stakeholder interviews. Many of you that attended the first and second workshops as well participated in online surveys, provided your valuable input on where growth should occur, what type of growth should occur, and what areas should be preserved, and of course, your community's desires for mobility into the future. And through the recurring feedback that we've heard so far in the workshops and surveys, we've also identified several key takeaways today. And we've organized that input in 4 big themes. The first theme is natural resources, the second is mobility, the third is housing, and the fourth is economic development. So about 900 plus survey respondents said that one of the top priorities that the comprehensive plan update should have is to protect the natural environment. You care about your natural resources. You care about being part of those and enjoying the recreation opportunities. The second thing that we heard was we should be able to implement an approach to growth and new development that prioritizes Sugar Grove's natural areas and trail network. There was support natural areas and preserves towards the village edges. And there's a desire to connect these green spaces, mainly wildlife corridors, wetlands, and woodlands. So these are some of the actual maps that we had at the community workshop. And you can see here is how, as we asked various questions of the participants that were here in the community workshop, how they answered. And just want to highlight that there were some key takeaways here. Community said, encourage growth so that residential neighborhoods, commercial areas, and civic venues can be up close and connected by the village's natural areas, parks and trails. There was support for protecting ecologically sensitive open spaces and promoting resiliency to flood events and changing climate through a variety of policies like an ecological overlay district. So I just want to go over a couple of them. There's also a number of people were in favor of encouraging enhanced passive open space and recreational programming, such as birding, nature walks, camping, etc., in partnership with community organizations and members. And this is how the community that was given a choice and to take chips that are on the left-hand side here of natural areas and preserves, community neighborhoods, parks, playgrounds, and recreational fields and courts, how they laid out where they felt that these were best suited in Sugar Grove. And the whole reason we're kind of communicating this is so that when Sarah Hare talks about the community's priorities, as we've heard so far, you can make a connection to where the community said they want to see these assets located. And so you can make a connection between what we've heard and what we're coming back to you as priorities. So in terms of the mobility, over 900 responses to the first survey participants, they noted that one of the biggest threats to Sugar Grove's quality of life in the next 10, 20 years is the continued ability to get around without driving. Bicycle paths and trails to connect the neighborhoods to nearby forest preserves. They wanted the comp plan update to prioritize spending on increasing bicycle mobility to connect between the neighborhoods and with surrounding areas. And of course, prioritize pedestrian connectivity internally and focused on the core of Sugar Grove. So here's a map that shows how the community indicated where were the best routes, where they desired pedestrian connectivity. Those are the blue strings that you see here in the map, a little difficult to see, but they're there. The community also indicated through these green strings that you see where they desired the bicycle connectivity. And of course, the red dots here signify where the community indicated were issues with pedestrian and bicycle mobility. Where were those conflicts? And those are here documented in here. They also when a prioritization exercise was done, is where would the community would like to spend their funding. There was an overwhelming majority of people that indicated funding desires and prioritization for bicycle mobility and pedestrian mobility, and not so much for transit and or automobile-driven mobility. So in terms of the housing desires, the respondents to the survey noted that a significant threat to the future quality of life in Sugar Grove is the need to meet the needs of population aging in place, and also younger population that is in need of housing. Specifically, workshop 2 participants were most interested in higher density residential uses in the south and the middle areas of the village. They identified a mix of single family, lower density single family, about single family duplex, estate residential, and small scale multifamily, about 14 to 16 units, as typologies is what residential growth should look like in the village. Here is a map that shows when given the chips that are identified on the left, they start with mid-scale, mixed-use, multifamily, all the way to estate residential, how the community, where they located that these residential uses were best suited. So as you can see, a number of them indicated that the multifamily and more dense housing, again, when we say dense, is again, about 4 to 16 units. They indicated those locations are better suited in the core of Sugar Grove, where development and infrastructure is already in place. So in terms of activating Sugar Grove, according to the first community survey, the community felt that retail is the most needed type of development in Sugar Grove in the next 10 to 20 years. The survey respondents, about 900 plus of them, said that the number one thing that would create community in Sugar Grove is more restaurants, bars, cafes, and more local retail and opportunities for community to gather. So retail uses, as you can see, this map here indicating they're concentrating the retail uses in the center of the village, including along Main Street and along the intersection of routes 3056 and Route 47. They also indicated a Main Street type of retail and a mixed-use type of retail as what they felt is what the commercial and retail growth should look like in Sugar Grove. The input also emphasized that the village's core has the greatest potential for small-scale, walkable retail for economic growth. Local retail, commercial, entertainment, and dining opportunities are what are missing from the village today, the people indicated. And large-scale retail areas were selected as more appropriate outside of the core and perhaps along the airport or along the highways. So this is a map of how the community indicated were the best locations for mixed use type Main Street type retail that you can see is centered around the core of the village, and more warehouse distribution, light industrial that are centered either along the highways or around the airport. Apologies for the not so clear graphic here, but this is an actual sort of download from our survey website that just indicates hotspots in and around Sugar Grove area where the community indicated they see potential for economic growth, where small scale walkable retail uses are appropriate. And when we presented this map to them about where you think economic growth needs to happen more, we also supplemented that with what do you think it should look like? And the pictures on the top left are an actual map of how the community responded to what they felt this growth should look like. So you can see the mixed-use retail, the participants felt mostly that the retail and commercial in Sugar Grove is sort of more life science center type community development, more Main Street type retail, and more mixed use type retail. Those were where the community's desires were indicated. So tonight, what is our objective here tonight? It's not to present a final plan. The process really is designed to allow this meeting to be more of a workshop. So for us to really test some of these recommendations that we've heard from you all and sort of understand and confirm your priorities today. We understand that many of you are here in attendance tonight in response to a draft land use plan that was shared as part of the process. And we're really happy you're here to really confirm your priorities. And this is an opportunity for us to walk you through the logic behind some of the priorities that are indicated in this draft land use plan for your community. The plan that was shared, is a process draft. And of course, as planners and as designers, we wouldn't really be doing our job if we weren't iterating and coming up with all potential combinations of opportunities out there. So tonight, you all here can help us dial that back and confirm what really you value so that we can take all those input and then use that as part of, refining the plan that we have so far that we will share with you. We also understand that many of you are here in response to some development interest or potential proposals. But we just want to be clear, we're not here to advocate for or against any development proposals that might be out there. We have not been provided with any specific proposals to include in this plan. And future, development decisions would really be made by the village, your village leadership. We can only respond here to information that we have, and at this point, we have the same information that you all have. And we have not seen any development proposals, just to be clear. We're here today to really provide you all with a development framework that if any development proposals come into the future, the community has the tools and the village has the tools to make decisions that are in line with your priorities. So what happens next after tonight? A comprehensive plan is very dynamic in nature, as you all know. The plan is never really done because new changes come up. There are variables to the plan are always changing. So after tonight, we will do our best to indicate and integrate your priorities into draft recommendations. And we'll provide a list of recommendations to the village and CMAP. And it's really then up to your village leadership once the draft plan is complete to adopt it. So after tonight's meeting, what I understand that there will be a public hearing to review the plan document in spring. And then there will be an adoption meeting with your leadership will determine whether the plan will be adopted or not. So.
Point that out, that was good. All right, great. So why is a comp plan needed? Well, having a comp plan provides a multitude of benefits to a community. Documenting your vision and priorities for change will drive how your village leadership will advocate for change, as Manisha said. A comp plan process can bring light to competing interests, and it's really a process, right? The value is in the process. And exploring those competing interests, bringing them to light and figuring out how to balance them. The comprehensive plan looks ahead to the next decades of growth, change, investment, and well-being in Sugar Grove. So what's the purpose of a future land use map, right? We said the focus of tonight's meeting is going to be on future land use mapping as well as transportation recommendations. So creating a future land use vision provides property owners and developers some predictability in the desired future built environment. It needs to identify a future build-out scenario that's supported by the community vision, yet still based in market reality. The map strives to include all of the elements of the comp plan, such as natural resources, economic development, housing, transportation. It's important to note that this map is visionary and it depicts hopefully what the community wants to have happen, not what's predicted to happen. The future land use map is often confused with the zoning map, so you can see the overlay here. There's many differences between the two. The largest of those is that a future land use map is not regulatory. So it's not a zoning map. It is just, it's a document to describe a future scenario that's supported by the community. So it illustrates the type of development that should occur, really based on planning best practices. That's why we're here as consultants, to bring that. It doesn't dictate either of these things, but it reflects what should occur based on community desires, best planning practices, infrastructure capacity, and market feasibility. We'll talk a little bit about infrastructure capacity. Lastly, a future land use map does not assume a specific timing. It's likely that the map will change. You had a comp plan in 2005. You had a land use map update in 2018. That wasn't that long ago, and lots has changed since then. So it's really meant to be a dynamic, constantly changing tool, and typically communities address that every 5 to 10 years. So what are the factors that are really influencing what we're bringing to the table is planning best practices and a knowledge of what's really influencing land use patterns in your community. So this process over this last year is intended to update that 2005 comprehensive plan, but as I said, a lot has changed since then. I think back then we didn't even have smartphones, right? So you can imagine what could potentially change here in the future, 10 to 15 years. And many of those recommendations were based on a different set of future projections and assumptions about how and how much the village would grow. So this process allows the village to step back from day-to-day administration of the village and identify factors influencing and shaping the community. So we'll start first with water availability. I'm just going to walk you through a few of these factors that you can understand the logic that we're bringing to the land use plan and kind of understand a decision-making process. So in terms of water availability, in some areas of our region, aquifers are being used up at a rate that exceeds their ability to recharge. Sugar Grove primarily relies on the deep sandstone aquifer as a water resource. Portions of Sugar Grove, the planning boundary around Sugar Grove, are in areas where the sandstone aquifers are at risk of becoming desaturated before 2030. According to the historical water use data reported to the Illinois Inventory Program, don't fall asleep. Sugar Grove's, I have to read this, I don't have this one down. Sugar Grove's water supply wells pumped an annual average of 1 million gallons per day, which was a 34% increase from the 2003 pumpage. Okay, that's pretty significant. So, that really reflects the growth that you've seen just in over those 10 years. Current estimates project that water pumpage from wells could increase as much as 51% by 2050. So that's kind of the planning horizon here. We're looking at population projections, water availability, looking out to 2050, as we said earlier, go on to 2050. Increased drought conditions, of course, caused by climate change, may pose significant risks to the village's water supply, especially if it continues to rely on shallower aquifers in the future. So for land use planning purposes, this means that we must consider how future development can influence the amount of water used, the supply and the quality of water sources, and how growth patterns could impact that available supply. So we have to consider as well the considerable cost of extending infrastructure to provide water services. So let's talk a little bit about population projections. So according to CMAP and the On to 2050, these population projections are a tool. They're a projection tool. There's a set of assumptions that go into, a series of assumptions that go into the outcome of those projections. But I'll share with you a little bit about what they say currently. Generally, the region's population overall is growing older. It's growing more diverse. Businesses' location preferences are changing, and more residents want to live in walkable communities. According to the population projections, growth within Sugar Grove is expected to increase through 2050, with the village's population growing by 97%, or almost doubling, by 2050. So looking at something like 18,000. So your neighbor at Yorkville's somewhere around 20,000 right now, so you can kind of put that into context. Growth within the village is projected to rapidly outpace growth within Kane County through 2050, with the county growing by 47%. So at your average density, so here in Sugar Grove, your housing is, Manisha was referring to units per acre earlier. It averages about 4 units per acre, your single family housing. So the village really needs to identify, if you do the math, a little over 600 acres of land to accommodate that future projected population. Of course, the land quantity to accommodate that population only reduces as you increase densities. I know it's late in the evening. I hope you all had a cup of coffee before you came tonight. So for the next 30 years, that's something like a little over 3,000 housing units. So at these densities, really all of that future housing can fit within the current boundaries of the village and even less so, and we'll share some detail on that here shortly. Let's talk a little bit about transportation. Of course, Sugar Grove is characterized being at the intersection of major state highways and of the Tollway. And for many businesses, there's a clear link between the land where it chooses to develop and the land's distance to a highway. Pretty straightforward logic there. The proximity to a tollway provides a logical and potentially attractive location for businesses that need easy access. By locating adjacent to the tollways, automobiles can avoid being in the core and hitting barriers to slow traffic, like traffic and stoplights, right? So there's logic to the patterns that we're seeing clearly. And again, back to, these are the things that are influencing the patterns over the last decade. So in terms of sense of place, post-war suburbs are often characterized by low-density single-family development and often don't have a downtown core. And you're lucky you have what you have down on Main Street. Present-day trends show that the desire of suburbs are really changing, especially really since the recent pandemic. With evolving priorities, people now prefer to stay in their own area for their daily needs and their weekend activities. They don't want to go to adjacent communities or drive to the city for certain things. There's an increasing desire for localized retail, dining, and entertainment options in suburbs. So that's reflective of what we heard from the community early on in this process and really is pretty consistent, not just across this metro region, but across the country. Not only is the region's population number changing, but both the national and regional population is also diversifying. CMAP's 2050 forecast estimates that the number of residents aged 60 and older will nearly double between now and 2050. As baby boomers downsize and the senior population continues to grow, many of those seniors may prefer places with accessible and walkable amenities. At the same time, consumer preferences and recent home buying trends indicate a growing desire for mixed use. So, the ability to be able to walk to your daily needs. And of course, when it comes to retail, we'll talk a little bit about this with economic development here in a bit, but retail really follows rooftops. That's what we say in planning. So the more population you have, the more some of that retail that you all desire is more realistic. And of course, retail also follows daytime population. So as a bedroom community, it's always challenging to provide those daily needs when many of the population isn't here during the day. So just a couple challenges there. Lastly, the existence of your ecologically sensitive lands and your open space. You all are really in a beautiful little niche here, nestled into your preserved lands. You have an incredible relationship with those lands. And what we're seeing is communities aspiring to kind of relink broken ecological corridors and really prepare for challenges related to flooding. Of course, that's not uncommon in our region. We're seeing communities invest in conservation more and more, and we know that proximity to open spaces and recreation provides not only health and well-being benefits, but it also provides a positive return on investment, which means that housing that's closer to parks and open space sees higher property values, typically speaking. So a little bit more about retail. Generally speaking, in the region, in this local region, there's retail leakage, which essentially means that people are going elsewhere for a lot of their needs. And there's a strong relationship between a healthy and diverse economy and the essential services that a municipality can offer. Diverse commercial and retail accommodations can provide a strong tax base while supporting local industry. However, like Sugar Grove, many suburbs are made up of homes, mostly homes, as we talked about, bedroom community. Therefore, residential properties make up the majority of the tax base. I'm sure that's something that you're all aware of. So, most suburbs, including Sugar Grove, As bedroom communities, residents are required to leave the area for restaurants, entertainment, shopping. So it's important for us to try to reduce the need to spend dollars outside of Sugar Grove to build that retail sales tax base. This will not only reduce the burden on residences and residents and build up the local tax base, but it also benefits to Sugar Grove Village as a whole. So we're going to talk about what we've heard thus far from the village and summarize those into the plan vision, which is essentially 3 vision statements. So the first 2 workshops really define these vision statements for us. So the first one is building and connecting on what's here. So theme number 1 under that is building on and connecting what's here, prioritizes concentrating development around existing development and growing with what is already here rather than building out elsewhere in the village boundaries. And Sarah just described about some of the influences and infrastructure, water availability, some of those that influence the ability to expand beyond what can be supported. It also considers leveraging existing community assets, such as the interstate frontage, the agricultural value, perhaps encouraging a car-free future, and focusing development around key community areas. And in order to reach this vision, the village must strive to offer many of the desires that we have heard during our engagement, such as more housing opportunities, options for people of all ages and abilities to live in the village, and connected transportation systems and mobility options. So this planning process involved the creation of themes which are forward-looking priorities under each vision and serve as organizing feature of the comprehensive plan. These themes outline how to reach the vision of building and connecting what's here. And each theme was developed based on community input. And under this vision, these major themes are, first, incorporating smart growth principles in the plan. Second, diversifying Sugar Grove's tax base and reducing the long-term costs. Sarah just talked a little bit about how the economic potential is related to all of this. Third, improving safety and connectivity within Sugar Grove and nearby destinations, and enhancing safety for pedestrian and cyclists. If you recall the map that I'd shown where there were all series of red dots all around where the community defined were major conflicts. The second theme here is growth at a neighborhood scale. This vision revolves around preserving and enhancing the existing character of Sugar Grove. We heard that community members want local shopping, entertainment, and community gathering, what harmonizes with the existing development. And as a result, this vision acknowledges that some growth is necessary to achieve objectives of diversifying the economy and maintaining a high quality of life. While maintaining this character, the village must also strive to meet the needs of an aging population and maintain attractiveness of the village to younger generations. The themes serving as priorities help us to achieve the vision of growth at a neighborhood scale are identified as 1, protecting and enhancing the community's neighborhood scale development as it grows into the future. Enhancing the local business climate and encouraging local entrepreneurship. Creating destinations for community gathering and entertainment. And creating more opportunities for people of all ages and backgrounds and abilities to prosper in the community. The third theme that we heard from you all was that you would like a community defined by nature. A community defined by nature envisions a sustainable community that balances future growth with the preservation of open space and recreation opportunities. It prioritizes expanding and connecting natural and ecological assets, including open space, nature, and recreation,
with the residents and visitors in the community. The three key takeaways from the engagement that we had thus far are that the community wants more parks to connect to natural assets and the preservation of ecological land and recreational amenities. And in order to accomplish this, the themes under community defined by nature are: one, to protect water resources through strategic growth planning and a focus on long-term sustainability, and to implement an approach to growth that situates new development within a framework that connects neighborhoods, commercial areas, and civic venues, and prioritizes Sugar Grove's relationship to natural areas, parks, forest preserves, and the trail network by maintaining access and views. Okay. I'd like to walk you through, I like to use the word logic in planning. What we start with are constraints anytime we're thinking about land use planning. In the case of Sugar Grove, one of those starting points is aquifers. Natural lands and ecological components create lands that are unsuitable for development, and that's really where we start as a starting point. So here you're seeing aquifers that are sensitive. Those that are most sensitive are highlighted in the darker orange color. We don't have to get into the detail here. This, by the way, is all available on the website, so you'll be able to visit any of these plans at this point forward, or maps, I should say. Here, what you see here is the overlay of those sensitive aquifers with what we define as sensitive ecological lands. So CMAP as a region has gone through an exercise where they've defined regional and local conservation areas. Some of those are already under conservation. And then if you layer in the floodplain in that, it really starts to begin to define the areas that are truly developable within the community. So these include ranges of lands in the conservation priorities like wetlands, floodplains, forested areas, prairies, those all that provide crucial ecosystem services, habitat, and recreational amenities. Both local and regional conservation priorities are identified and preserved for preservation in the plans that you're going to see tonight. So here you can see those kind of overlaid a little bit more clearly. And so you can start to see, you know, kind of where the gaps lie in the community core and where we're being a bit more sensitive about where that growth might occur in the future. So I'm going to walk you through a series of what we consider priorities. So based on the input to date and all the priorities and themes that Manisha walked you through, this is the exercise of taking those priorities and input and mapping exercises, et cetera, and applying them to a future growth scenario for Sugar Grove. So think of it that way, as a scenario. It's currently in a draft form. So by no means as Manisha said, are we presenting the plan this evening. We look forward to your comments, and we'll talk about how we'll get there at the end of the evening here. So as we see it, as planning practitioners, your priority should really start with creating that village center that the community desires. It's really key to placemaking, giving a sense of place to the community, and implementing smart growth strategies, as we discussed earlier. Engagement has shown that the village desires an attractive and unique core. By focusing investment in and around the village core, Sugar Grove can develop the desired civic area that celebrates its identity and invites businesses, residents, and visitors alike. Sugar Grove currently has, bear with me, 348,000 square feet of retail, which equates to about 34 square feet of retail per capita. So if we take that math and multiply that out, so current level of service, we multiply it out by the future projected population of Sugar Grove, it equates to a need for about an additional 300,000 square feet of retail, which is just under 7 acres of land to support that future population. So this is similar to like the town center of Batavia, for example. Main Street there, like the core, is about 6 acres, and that supports 26,000 residents. So that gives you kind of a comparable there. By considering both precedent research and population projections, we recommend that the village core be approximately 6 to 10 acres. The area that you see here is about 3 times that. So, you know, there are many variables determining what happens here, right? One being mainly property ownership,
market demands, right? Availability of land. So we've just generally said, okay, in these areas we can infill and we can create a new town center development. And that's large enough to provide room for retail, dining, entertainment, residences, as well as important civic spaces like parks. Yet it's small enough that it can be properly supported by your community and properly scaled. So we recommend that this be about 1 to 2 stories. That includes a mixture of shopping, dining, entertainment, and some higher density residential, not necessarily high density residential. We'll get into some details about that, but probably no more than 14 units per acre. We recommend that the village center generally be located at the core of the community, and you can kind of see how this aligns with the input that we've gotten to date. So second priority, meant to share some imagery as I talked through all of that. This is just one example. There are many examples of suburban communities that have tried to kind of retrospectively go back and create kind of a community core. There's lots of visual preferences related to this. We're not going to get into those. We're not saying this is exactly what your village core should look like. There are many precedents in the region that we can refer to in the plan to give you some tools to get it to be what you would want it to be. So second priority is to infill residential around that town center. There's multiple environmental and public health studies that highlight the negative impact of kind of sprawl, right? So suburban development patterns. They include increased infrastructure costs, limited land availability, and increased carbon emissions due to driving, as well as encroachment on wildlife habitats and poor public health outcomes due to physical inactivity and others. So of course, not talking specifically about Sugar Grove here, but national trends. And as a result, it's really a priority from a planning perspective to fill in the gaps of existing development. So we recommend that the village encourage infill development within its existing footprint to avoid continued low density residential outside of what we're kind of considering the core. And that'll really help to preserve the rural character of the community, which is something that we heard throughout the process so far. This is kind of a strategy that we refer to as gentle infill, which will allow for medium to higher density residential, as I said, something between 4 and 12. So 4 is about where you're at now, and then increasing to something like 12 per acre is what we feel is appropriate. With existing development, this includes single family homes. So this is not all apartment complexes and condos. This is a mixture. It's really where planning is going these days. We're moving away from single use zoning and moving more towards a mixture of uses. And this gets to some of the goals that Manisha talked about in terms of serving all ages and their demands related to housing. Oops. So I wanted to just take a moment to walk you through a couple examples here of what that could possibly look like. So you can see there's still some lower density housing, but all centered around kind of a common core destination, preserving some of your open lands and critical corridors, et cetera. So a couple of diagrams here, because while we're designers, our role here is as planners. So we're not designing the community. We're showing some key connections related to transportation. We're not going to get into designing what these sites would be at this stage, right? Because individual property ownership will need to indicate desire for that before we do that. But we want to show kind of, generally speaking, kind of how this village center and these mixed neighborhoods work. So what you're seeing here is that village center kind of use that we talked about earlier. The circle is indicating what's considered a 5-minute walk. So your village center would accommodate some of that. And to fill out that neighborhood, then you start to fill in some what we're calling flexible residential. So as I alluded to earlier, not saying single family, multifamily, specific densities, but being flexible about how those occur. And then acknowledging that in order to provide services to neighborhoods, providing some level of small scale, neighborhood scale retail is appropriate. And then, of course, accommodating those natural corridors as we talked about, and providing level of service of parks for those future infill spaces. And then you might get to your more traditional single family as you move out from those kind of core neighborhood walkable kind of core spaces. So here you see it all kind of come together as a 5-minute walk. And that's a little prettier version of, right, of how that kind of comes together. So let's talk a little bit about those parks and open space. So this is not indicating your only new parks and open space throughout the community. This is where we're saying the priority would be just based on working around your village core, infilling the footprint that you've already got. And then the green that you see here is accommodating those ecologically sensitive lands. Sugar Grove contains many ecological features, such as forests, wetlands, rivers. When connected, this tapestry is referred to as an ecological corridor. The village is bisected by an ecological corridor made up of Bliss Woods Forest Preserve, Aurora West Forest Preserve, and the Culver Forest Preserve. There's also 15 dedicated parks that are managed by the village. And open space contributes to the city's overall economic strength by increasing the aesthetics and distinctive character of your village. It also supports natural ecosystem by providing food and habitat for wildlife. And open spaces provide community benefits, as we talked about earlier. The function of these areas can be measured both economically as well as through community benefits when considered holistically. Parks, of course, have lots of benefits to the community, and more time spent in parks and green spaces can help alleviate a lot of mental health issues, et cetera. We can have a whole meeting just on that. So a little indicator here about what your future parks and the scale and your infill areas might look like. So then let's talk about these gray areas here. We start to see how this is starting to build on itself in terms of where we see priorities. So in order to make that town center happen, it's really important that we find opportunities for economic development throughout the community. We need to find some footprint, and as we say as planners, if not here, then where, right? So we have to figure that out because we need to build daytime population. We need to provide jobs for that future population. And so what is that going to look like? As we previously stated, Sugar Grove's tax base is made up of a majority of residential housing in the area. The residents of Sugar Grove, of course, would be well served by future economic development and commercial and industrial growth within the community to increase taxable property and capture more spending locally. With a more diversified tax base and new sources of revenue to further balance out revenue from residential property taxes, the village can continue to meet the needs of existing and future residents and keep local finances in reserve and minimize the need for future increases in property taxes, et cetera. Economic development opportunities will, of course, also benefit the village by increasing that daytime population that we talked about. Businesses, what I want to say is Sugar Grove, of course, is the bedroom community, right? So we talked about that daytime population being extremely low, and this is a major factor that businesses look at as a metric when they're determining where to locate. Many companies, such as retail franchises and restaurant chains, typically have requirements of a minimum daytime population that the area has to have in order to locate there. So we want to prioritize expanding economic development opportunities to increase that daytime population to realize the vision. So these two priorities really go hand in hand as economic development creates jobs and increases the daytime population. So there's really no standard for quantities of specific business types per capita. We talked a little bit about retail. That logic doesn't apply necessarily to economic development. It's really specific to how the village operates and how they structure their general fund. What we don't want to do here is limit any opportunity for economic development or for property owners to develop their land. Instead, we recommend that it be regulated through the zoning code. So again, this is just a future vision. Your zoning, it may inform changes to your future zoning code when the interest to develop comes up. The community, of course, needs revenue, jobs, and tax base for all the taxing districts. So it's important to note that the economic growth will benefit much more than just the general fund. It'll also benefit all of the taxing districts like the forest preserves, et cetera. So it's specific to the map here. We wanted to point out a couple of specific things that are kind of influencing locations here. We talked about those major intersections, right? So some logic there to the upper piece at the intersection of a major state highway and a tollway. Building on what you already have, we talked about that. So the Heartland Drive area, proximity to the airport, et cetera, and leveraging area around that potentially to build on what's already successful there. And then the third area, this is intended not to imply a future interchange, by the way. We are not recommending any future interchanges in this location. But one factor that is influencing some opportunity here is the planned substation that some future businesses might be able to leverage and take advantage of for things like data centers. Again, I want to reinforce here, and we'll get into some more imagery, but want to reinforce that what we're trying to encourage here in terms of economic development really should minimize any potential negative impacts to the community, such as traffic, visual, noise, pollution. We're not encouraging uses like that within the village footprint at all. These should be things that create, good jobs, et cetera. And then lastly, here you can see that we propose concentrating some, excuse me, let me get to the imagery here. So kind of making that point, right? So we're not talking about necessarily warehouses or things that will create truck traffic, but really using the assets and kind of the standard of living here to attract businesses that will create good jobs. And so that's why we're calling this business park uses. So we don't have a specific industrial use in the future land use plan. So this is how you see it kind of come all together. And so you see some more infill here of some of these uses. You can see that we focused some opportunities for highway commercial along 47, talking about the per capita retail demand and trying to capture some of that here in Sugar Grove. It's logical that some of that would happen on 47, but not making 47 all a retail corridor. I can't tell you how many consulting jobs I have where we go back and try to fix retail corridors after we do that. So we're not trying to do that here. We're really trying to concentrate a lot of that commercial growth in the core. This map, so you can see, I want to point out the ecologic overlay here is the gray. And so we would encourage from a policy standpoint that future development be sensitive to those. It doesn't mean that the land is fully undevelopable. It means that anything that happens in those areas needs to be sensitive to that. But you can see that we've taken some of that and identified that for future conservation as well. I'm going to move on from this map, but we can come back to it during Q&A. I want to point out some of our specific transportation recommendations here. Manisha talked a lot about one of the priorities for residents was making sure that they're connected to their natural assets. While the Virgil Gilman Trail is a major spine through the community, many residents express that there's limited connections to the trail by walking or cycling. Major roads are also missing critical bike infrastructure that would create a comprehensive network here. So this map reflects proposed trails that would help close these missing gaps and better complete the network. You can see here we've highlighted what we think are some priority paths, which you can see in pink. So you can see the trails lightly dotted in green, and then they're highlighted in pink, and the ones that we think would really kind of help make those key connections to some of the core, key community destinations. As of 2022, of course, there's no transit service in the village of Sugar Grove. You all know that, but we're thinking 15, 20, even 30 years down the road, that it's really important to designate a location for that. Be the need arise, be the opportunity exists to take advantage of that with Metra. The closest regional transit connection, as you all know, is in Aurora. So the lack of transit and kind of the separated land use and lack of kind of core focused sidewalks, combined with intersections of major roadway thoroughfares, create challenges across the board in Sugar Grove for walking and biking safely. And of course, you all rely on your automobiles here, which is something that we don't see changing anytime in the near future. However, we should be forward thinking about this. And as we think about trends in the region, you look at the 2050 plan, there is demand in suburbs, even outer suburbs out here where they would welcome transit. So just thinking about where that might occur. So you can see the M down here in the Settlers Ridge location, we think would be an appropriate location. And with that, you can couple, if you look at the land use plan, you can couple some of your neighborhood skills. And you can potentially even think about if Metro doesn't come in the next 10, 15, 20 years, a dedicated bus arrangement with PACE and how that could potentially hit some of those core higher density areas within the community, and that's highlighted in purple there. We did take a stab at some future roadway connections, but you can see that those are very few, and it's very different from the 2005 plan, which had lots of roads connecting lots of things. Here we're really focusing on the village scale, and we're not making any recommendations related to state highways. In fact, we as consultants feel that they're fine the way they are. They don't necessarily need to get bigger to serve the community. So what you're seeing here is a focus on local road connections in order to make some of these land uses happen. And you can see the ones in blue are actually proposed alignments from other studies. So those are not part of our plan, but planning processes, one of the very first exercises is incorporating an existing plan. So there's always ideas out there. And so we're just trying to acknowledge what those ideas here in this plan. There's a level of detail here that you can certainly study on your own, as these are available on the website. But I want to point out a key recommendation here with proposed kind of underpasses underneath the highways. So these highways are of a scale where it's difficult not only to convince change to happen, but even with kind of the traffic volumes and the conditions that are located there currently, even with the infrastructure there, may not still be safe. And so would your neighborhood still be really be connected? So we have a question for you tonight in the polling that's about whether or not you support public investment in creating kind of safe connections between neighborhoods going under or over highways that kind of bisect your community. So you can see there's some indications of improved crosswalks, a couple of new proposed stoplights. Again, we can come back to this in the Q&A. So if you have your cell phones available, we'd ask that you utilize those now if you're interested in participating in the polling. If you don't have a cell phone, please let us know, and we're happy to come around and you can use my phone. You can look at pictures of my kids too. And as we do this, if anyone has any issues, technically, just let us know. Ashley here is the tech pro here, so we're going to let her operate while I read you some questions. So you're just going to type in menti.com, and that should immediately bring you to a page to ask you to put in the code. And I'll read the code for those of you that may not be able to see it. It is 4976 5931.
You should be seeing a thumbs up. That lets us know you're good.
Oh, I see lots of thumbs up here.
Oh.
That means you're really enjoying yourself.
Pardon?
I don't know. I think any color is good. Any color means you're having fun.
Yeah, that's okay. Just as long as.
And if you'd like to use the Wi-Fi, there's free Wi-Fi that you can log into if you don't want to use your Library Plus. Thank you. So we'll give you a minute to do that. If anyone's having issues, just raise your hand. We have about 30 minutes left in the meeting, and our goal is to, move through the polling. We don't have that many questions for you tonight. And then leave about hopefully 15 minutes for Q&A for the panel of folks here to answer questions that you may have tonight. Yes. I'm going to ask you questions, so you don't need to answer any questions yet. I'll walk you through them. Thank you for asking that.
We don't have anything up yet. You should just be seeing it up.
All right. So we'll advance, and you'll see a question pop up, and I'll walk you through it. All right.
Something should be popping.
Can I go ahead? Okay. We've heard your desire to establish a place for retail dining and entertainment. What is your level of support for creating a village center? So as you can see in the bottom right, it counts the inputs. And don't worry, if we do advance the slide, it will still accommodate your answer.
Also, the code, if you didn't already put it in, it's still at the top right there. 4976 5931.
Huh. It just knows.
Oh, QR doesn't need code.
Oh, QR. Okay. Oh, that's good to know. I didn't realize that. QR code takes you right there. So again, this isn't voting, it's polling. And it's really just intended so that all of us in the room here tonight can get a sense for how everyone else, in the room feels. So we like to be as transparent as possible in our process. So we've got 119, so we'll move forward, but I see 84 in support of a town center.
There it is.
So what is your level of support for creating the village center generally in the area indicated? To get a little bit more specific here, are we on the right track? Did we hear you right in the first couple of meetings? Are we totally off? The yellow area, I know it's a little tiny. So the top little chunk, if you will, is right off Park Ave. And then your grocery store is there in the middle. And then there's privately owned land there at the corner of 47 and 30. So just generally kind of around that area, right? Lots of factors that will influence how that comes to fruition. But the parcel there off Park Ave is about, I want to say actually it was like 7 acres-ish.
Mhm.
So like that footprint of that town center could fit on that piece.
Also, if you zoom in to the picture, it doesn't affect the vote.
But we wanted to with these maps still give you some context of the whole community there. So
All right,
so we're at 118. So is that 3.8 out of what?
out of 5.
3.8 out of 5. Okay, that puts it in context. Okay. So building on that, what is your level of support for creating the highest density housing in and around the village center? So some of that is already occurring on either side of the Settlers Ridge area, and that's set to infill, and then some of this is in the village and some of it's not. But the idea here being centering those infill areas around your existing neighborhoods and then connecting them. Okay. And as I said, we'll move on to the next question just for time, but your answers will still log as you answer them. So building on that a little bit more, what is your level of support for housing the future population of Sugar Grove in the footprint indicated? So we talked a little bit about staying within your footprint. What we didn't get to with water availability, and I should have mentioned earlier, is once you get south of the tracks, it becomes very sensitive in that area and obviously very expensive to extend services. So our recommendation is really to kind of tighten that footprint in order to decrease those investments, those costs, and infill in your existing kind of core area. All the questions. Yeah, we can. Oh, yeah, okay. Working it out up here. Ashley was brilliantly just suggesting that we can put the access to the Menti on the website so that anyone can poll on that and then we can grab the results later. So online survey that will only build on the input that we got tonight rather than kind of a separate survey. Okay, great, let's move on. What is your level of support for investing in new parks within the ecological corridors to ensure that all new neighborhoods are served by parks? And that green there is really just the ecological corridors. There would be even more parks. We probably should have indicated that on here. Parks within every 5-minute walk neighborhood. So that circle that I showed you earlier. So there'd be probably 4 or 5 of those circles in there. Great, let's move on. What is your level of support for investing public dollars in connecting existing neighborhoods and destinations? Specifically, we'd like to know about those red symbols we talked about earlier, the underpasses. So you can see, Ashley's gonna point them out here. So really focusing them, no, there are these symbols here. So kind of 3 priority ones, down by the future metro station, at under 56, and then connecting to the virtual Gilman Trail. Okay, so this one's a little bit lower, so let's talk about that in the Q&A. And please take a comment card as well if you haven't done that already. We'd love for you to fill those out. We're almost through the questions. What is your level of support for further investment in Sugar Grove's trail network to encourage more walking, biking, walking and biking within the community. So you can see again, it's the light green dotted connections. And you can actually see the existing trails are a solid green and the proposed future trails are dotted. And then the pink lines are the priority trails. Oh. So any questions on that? Okay. So this one's about the job creation and economic development topics we discussed. What is your level of support for leveraging job creation and daytime population in the vicinity of the planned, specifically this area here, the substation area north of Bliss? We'll talk about some specific areas. We have 3 areas we're gonna ask you about. We're gonna talk about north of Bliss. We're gonna talk about the intersection of the Tollway and 47. And then we're gonna talk about kind of the heartland north of the airport area. So this is specifically about these lands up here and leveraging proximity to the interstate. Should those be prioritized for that use? Should they remain as is? Okay, so 2.3 there we're at. I think we're almost done. Yeah. What's your level of support for leveraging the intersection of 47 and 88 north of the Tollway for that purpose of economic development? Should that become something else? Should it be leveraged to benefit the community? Should it stay as it is? Okay. That might be our lowest gauge yet, 1.9. Okay, so last area here. What is your level of support for leveraging the intersection of 47 and 88 south of the Tollway for economic development? Oh, I'm sorry. That area, we should have highlighted it. That's our mistake. So this area would be, we'll have to change the map. Sorry about that. This area would be just south of that area we talked about before. And you can see that we actually didn't place anything there. We have, if we go back to the map, you can see that we have some future residential growth in that region. We have some neighborhood scale residential along the highway. But there's no gray in that area for the business park development. Okay. Okay, so then this is that last gray area we talked about, the Heartland Drive area and north of the airport. So same question. Okay. Give everybody a minute. We're just at 80 here, so. Okay. So the question here is, what is your level of support for infill of residential housing within in neighborhood commercial uses south of the Tollway? So again, we'll have to update this map. Sorry about that. But the area we're talking about is this area, if you recall from the map. And we can come back to these questions if we need to. So infilling residential, and then along the highway here, encouraging some neighborhood scale services and retail. But if you recall from the map, we're showing a future park and some preserved areas in this location. Okay, let me pull that up. Oh, it's on the desktop. See, we're truly workshopping now. So I'm going to pull that map up so that you can see this area. So the purple up here and the yellow here is what we're talking about. So you can see some of that sensitive land would still need to be accommodated for. And then there's future park proposed in that location as well for that purpose. So anything gray would need to be worked around in that particular region. Okay, so let's go back to the question. Okay. Okay, so that's the questions that we had for you tonight. Thank you for participating. We are right on time with about 15 minutes left for question and answer. I'm going to pull up the map, assuming that there's some questions related to that. And then we've got a panel of folks here from the village, from CMAP, and then us from Design Workshop, the consultant, here to answer questions. And I'm sorry, we don't have a mobile mic, so if you could speak up.
Yes, since this is my first time in one of your workshops, the other two people on the outer edges of your surveillance were never allowed or notified of these things. So there's a whole lot of people that were never informed of these. We've missed out on everything.
Well, as far as the village's outreach program for this, we followed the similar approach that we've done with other issues in the community. And while obviously, a fair number of you are completely unaware of this process, the fact of the matter is it's been highly publicized. It's been on the website since day one. We have had any number of people contact us during the project, questions about what the project is and what we're doing and all of that. And we've invited them to events and to participate in the surveys. I think the village has extended an invitation to everybody, and if you haven't followed the village's website or the Facebook page, I don't know what else we could do to let you know that we're working on something.
Published ahead of time in the newspapers where we would see it in the local papers, because normally like these types of things are buried at the back end and there's everything up front. You only hear about it the week after it's happened.
The question was, is there a way to publicize events like this or others in the newspaper? All I can tell you is we regularly let all the newspapers know when we have public events, and they choose whether or not to advertise it. We don't. One thing I want to make clear: none of these meetings were buried in the public notice section of the newspaper because, well, they're not required public hearings, but they were not buried, in the newspaper where you couldn't find them. We relied on, the digital forms of getting the word out, like we've done with other events and issues in the village in the past, and those have worked well for us. So.
How much of this, it's pretty clear the concept that the village wants to continue a green space outlook, ecological sensitivity, retaining the character of the village. How much of this CMAP program influences what the village administration actually does going forward with zoning and what may come in the future, since this is a future looking detailed advice, and it also, as you say, that things in the village may change as well as the village boundaries. How does this impact what may happen going forward?
Thank you for your question. I think the first thing I just want to clarify is the recommendations here on future land use map and priorities are not really the village's priorities. They are the citizens' priorities that we've heard through the process that we've had thus far. So just as a clarification for that, and maybe Walter, you might want to talk about what happens after you receive the draft of the comprehensive plan update from the planning team and CMAP.
Well, once the plan's adopted, I expect that the village board will direct staff to begin making changes to the zoning regulations to reflect what the policy recommendations in the comprehensive plan are. I don't expect that that's going to happen immediately, because that's going to be a process in and of itself. But I would expect that over time, we'll be making amendments to the zoning regulations to reflect the specific recommendations in the comprehensive plan, because there are some, I'll say, conflicts is maybe too strong a word, but I'll say inconsistencies with the current regulations and some of these recommendations. So we're aware that we're going to need to update and refine the zoning regulations to reflect these aspirations that are in the plan.
Any zoning changes that are made would go through a public process as well. So that, that would be something that would be noticed up and folks would be able to come out and talk about those as well.
So this map you have here, that's not your current Sugar Grove jurisdiction, right? This is the future zone changes and the whole work that you're looking at, right?
That is correct. It's the
You
planning
know, the
bound.
north side, which a lot of us are in here for, are not Sugar Grove.
That's right. It's a planning boundary for
So
Sugar
that's
Grove.
what you fight, right?
Excuse me.
Well, in your plan, several times in your presentation, you said that you would stay within the footprint. But now you're talking about expanding beyond the footprint of the village. And I know, talk about rezoning, but are also then, does that include annexing more land into the village limits? I know I was at a meeting a week ago in the village, I expressed about my own property, but it does fall within there. So when are they gonna draw specific boundaries? And to someone's point, those are people that are not residents of the village, so why would they be following the village website or following what the village is doing? There's a county zoning, county plan as well, which has different land uses for that. And so, and I'm not trying to be starting a conflict here. I had a very nice conversation with you last week, but I'm just bringing that up because it seems like you're going against what was said in the plan itself.
Well, actually, you bring up a good point that I think, the professionals all overlook here, because while, yes, the plan does cover territory outside the corporate limits of the village. But a couple things. One is the village has a 1.5 mile jurisdiction beyond its corporate limits over land use decisions, whether they're in the village or not. And so this would provide a direction as to what the expectations are if the land use changes in the future. I lost my train of thought there. So we're talking about, the land use designations that are on this map for property that's not in the village don't affect that property until the property's annexed or the property owner wants to change the use of the property. So if, you have, your house is, let's say on Green Road there, and, we're showing, most of it's not shown for development, but if there was development shown on Green Road, it doesn't change anything with what you're doing now. It will only come into effect or matter when and if you decide to annex a property or develop the property and change the use of the property. So that's when this becomes or has an effect on that. And again, I cannot reiterate enough what Sarah said about the description between the future land use plan map and what that represents in the zoning map. The comprehensive plan it's a policy document. It has no regulatory authority whatsoever. It's a guide and it's a plan. And a lot of decisions in the future hopefully are made from it. But compare that to the zoning regulations, which are very specific, and some would argue dictate what can and can't be done with the property. That's the more effective tool for the use of the property and how the property is developed in the future. And that's why we'll have to undertake a process to update the zoning regulations so that it's consistent with recommendations of the plan.
So can I follow up on that?
I'd just like a clarification. You are the person that said that this plan is put together based on input from all the residents, and this is what they've indicated. Based on the informal survey that you conducted here, I didn't hear a ground law support for commercial and industrial use north of I-88. So I really understand, I'm trying to understand, where is that ground law support coming from from the citizens of Sugar Grove? Because I don't see it. I see a big conflict here.
Can we add
So-
this crown part of this process too, since they own most of that land?
Why not?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we can only use the information that we've received from the community thus far. So if members of the community participated, we can base our recommendations only on the people that participated and what we heard from them. We can't base it on hypothetical situations. So the feedback that you all gave us today would be incorporated into refining the plan and the recommendations going forward. And that was the whole reason for this meeting as a workshop and not a presentation of a plan. Just to clarify that.
You're gonna add the survey links on the website.
Yes.
They'll also be on the village's website, so anybody here could go and retake that survey. Because the other thing I saw up there was you had 1,200 and some people respond on your surveys. We're a community of over 5,000. So you have a 20% response, and that's the basis of
Well,
direction.
And you did make.
yeah, Sarah, do you want to come? So just to give you, yeah, so if I could just make a comment on that. This may surprise you, but it actually is in line with the type of input across the nation for these kinds of processes. And we do this all over the nation, all over the world. And that type of survey response is fantastic for a community of this size.
Okay, so a couple of follow-ups to that. So you're talking about growth. Growth is good. What is not in these presentations is the impact on the schools. That's not discussed at all in here, what's happening with the schools. And when you say you're growing, our school population is declining over the last several years. So you're talking about growing here soon, but the information from schools is exactly the opposite. It's declining. And to further that, the district's running a referendum, the library's trying to maintain a referendum. There's talk about tax credits to bring businesses in. So I'm really struggling with how you're going to bring in more people when the metrics are going the other way, but taxes are going higher. Why does somebody want to come to Sugar Grove? And how are you going to pay for all of these things? So without the taxes, you're giving tip money away. How are you going to pay for the infrastructures for the fire department, for the parks, for the schools, when you're giving away the money in tips?
And can I just add to that, because I think that's where my mind was going to, the survey, the presentations have been great. The survey was good, but I felt it was very loaded and lopsided. It was like, of course we want green space, of course we want to have bike paths, but at what expense? And so to say that, you know, we're getting the survey results is probably a true statement, but when you ask a survey question, it needs to be compared with the what if, right? It's not just, do you want this or don't you want it, but it's like at what expense?
Yeah. Well, to answer the infrastructure expense question, Manisha in her opening comments, and I think Jake touched on it as well in his comments. There were three overriding goals with the development of this comprehensive plan. It is to provide economic, environmental, and social sustainability in the community. The whole matter of providing a tax base for the community, and I think Sarah touched on it in her comments. The purpose of the expanding the tax base, bringing in uses other than residential, benefits not just the village, it's all the other taxing districts. The township has roads to maintain, and they need a tax base too. The school district needs a tax base too. The park district needs a tax base. This library needs a tax base. So it's not village centered with the land uses and the tax base. It's to benefit all the other taxing districts as well, because they have a stake in this as well. Now, if the.
Can I ask you then why you're offering the TIF districts for so long to these other businesses to come in? Is that to draw on the residents and the houses and people to build the houses so they can get taxed to offset the money that's being taken away?
The TIF districts were established to initiate or expedite, encourage, however you want to characterize it, economic development, which was lacking in the community. And, you know, as far as, well, unlike other communities, Sugar Grove's tax increment financing districts are pay-as-you-go, meaning if you want tax increment finance or benefits, you have to provide a tax increment that covers the benefit you're asking for. We don't make, we don't sell bonds, we don't do loans with the TIF, with our TIF districts like some communities do. So it's pay as you go. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why we haven't had a lot of takers, because they're looking for a free ride and we're not giving them a free ride. And as far as, you know, future use of the TIF districts, I can't predict what that's going to be because I don't know what the opportunities are, if there are going to be opportunities in the future. You know, the village board has been very careful and judicious how it uses the TIF. And some of you may not know, but the village board actually refunded money from one of the TIF districts to all the taxing districts because we built up a reserve and we had nobody using it. So we gave it back to the taxing districts. We don't, you know, but nobody talks about that.
Hi, can I ask a question, please? The maps have been very helpful, so thank you for sharing those. My question is about the legend. So when we talk about business park or corridor that's for commercial, which one of these legends would allow for like a gas station or a truck stop, or like where is that going to show up, or is that not part of the land use map?
To go a little bit further on that, can the CMAP team elaborate on the areas that were put in gray, how the green space that was the most important thing to propose at Sugar Grove, how that would fit in, especially like as she's mentioning the 88 corridor. First thing people are going to see coming out of town in Sugar Grove, the last thing we want them to see is a bunch of ugly warehouse buildings and have them take that as this is what Sugar Grove is. They're going to see that before they ever see the downtown. So what is part of the recommendations towards green space and towards limiting to the impact of a bunch of buildings that were proposed the last go around by Frank?
So anything in those ecologically sensitive maps, the recommendation is not to touch it. So it would either be programmed recreational space or open space.
Is that the gray area?
No, that's the green. I can go back to the full map.
And it's red, the corridor is red.
Red is where gas stations will show up. Thank you for that.
Oh, this one doesn't.
I'm just trying to understand.
It's on the website, I think, the full map.
If
This one doesn't have it.
Question real quick. When I look at the map, I look at the gray, and I look at Sugar Grove, and everything you put in commercial is outside of Sugar Grove. There's nothing in the center or near residential area.
The business park?
You don't have a problem, I just want to understand, you don't have a problem putting a commercial and industrial area by a nice residential area right at 88 and 47. That's a very residential area, and you're putting a commercial space there. I think that's inexcusable.
It's a business park designation.
But that's
Business
not,
park.
but that's not what's been discussed. That's what you guys are saying, but that's not what's been discussed. warehousing,
So-
data centers, transfer areas.
Right.
I've been to 3 meetings now, and I'll tell you what, I haven't been able to speak or provide input in anything like this. I've been to 2 Sugar Grove Village meetings. You don't give an opportunity to talk about this. Everybody's interested in what's happening there, and it's very convenient that we're not going to talk about that. That's all I have to say.
So if we could get some clarity on that, because us as consultants, we don't live here. We don't know what those specific proposals are.
So the trustees do, so maybe the trustees. can talk
So
about it.
that's right, that needs to be part of the process, and we haven't reviewed any plans for those areas. What you're seeing here is a logic that we walk through as planning consultants, applying best practices in planning to your community. This is by no means influenced by,
You tell me where
We don't
the
know.
best practices for putting commercial right across the street from a heavy residential area. Please give me an example.
so what that comes down to from our perspective is a site planning design exercise. So visual impacts, any other negative impact would have to be dealt with through the zoning code and through site design. So from a land use standpoint, there's plenty of precedent for that, especially at the interchange of a highway and a tollway.
I'm sorry, so I live in this area too, and I suspect that's why many of us are here right now. If you look at that part of 47, right, it's hills and curves, and ever since the other side of the interchange went in, we have semi trucks that are barreling down 47 at 70 miles an hour already.
Oh, right here.
There have been several accidents, and for people who live on the west side of 47, they're on wells. If you put industry on that east side of that, north of 47, south of 40, you're literally poisoning the well, not figuratively, literally poisoning our wells. And you talked about how the water supply isn't sufficient to keep up with the population we have now, and you want to double the population. This defies logic. Defies logic.
Thank you. You don't have to yell, we're here to listen, so. Thanks. Sure.
Sorry. I was one of the 40 people, I guess, that showed up in July. Just to walk through, there wasn't some cabal or secret thing that they told only 40 of us. We got the message on Facebook, we got the survey. I don't know how or why things did or didn't get disseminated. When the processes of what we thought would be nice where, it was brainstorm session, open conversation. I know for myself, and I can only speak for myself, when it was asked where would industry make me least uncomfortable, it was not the understanding that that was what would happen. It was where I live, what am I good with? So I'm not defending or saying that plan matches necessarily what I asked, but I did want to clarify that I was there. I tweeted about it. I even double checked to make sure I knew what date I was talking about today. If I was really happy to see the concept of connecting neighborhoods. I have 3 kids. They're 6th grade and under. One of the biggest problems with moving here is that they can't ride their bikes to neighborhoods. They can't get anywhere safely. That's something that growing up, I grew up in Wheaton, that was not a problem. Now again, totally different suburb. I know that. I'm not making apples and oranges comparisons, but I just wanted to point out a positive. I like that part of the initiative. It is something that when we're trying to encourage our kids to connect with their friends and get off their devices, I can't safely recommend my kid ride across 47. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
You live in town?
I live right behind all of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
So how many acres is the dotted portion of that map?
I think we just emailed about this last week. Walter, we emailed it to Walter. We can find that.
Well,
It's an easy answer to get if I had the software.
You said earlier that by 2015, say you recommending that, said 600 and some acres of land needs to be developed to support the population that would come in by 2050, correct?
Right.
So how much existing farmland is in Sugar Grove right now from Merrill Point to, say we're up by Merrill Road, that subdivision? How much existing farmland is in that right now? Perhaps 1,000, another 1,000?
No, not that much.
How much? You need 600 acres, there's more than 600 acres there, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, this piece
keep
just right
spreading
here
out
is about
your
100
services.
acres, you know?
Keep spreading out your services, keep spreading out your costs, you're talking about costs, you're talking about water. You're talking about stay within your existing infrastructure, and you keep sprawling. And now you're sprawling all the way from Jericho to Main Street. And I know that's a proposed, it's not definitely gonna happen, but it's on your map, don't shake your head.
No.
It's on your map.
Which area specifically? I don't, are we talking about the gray area, the gray area?
Everything that's colored in a dark color, that is the limit of the village's planning jurisdiction. That is not where we're not showing growth and development here or here or down here.
No,
Stay as they are.
I understand that, but I'm saying that, I guess what my point is, it needs to be concentrated in the existing.
That's
Middle of Sugar Grove.
that's what this plan is doing. It's concentrating the growth, future growth and development between 88 and, for the most part, the railroad tracks, where it is now. As Design Workshop has pointed out time and again, the emphasis on infill development. There's a lot of undeveloped land in and around the village, and we're not looking for massive expansion beyond what our current utility system can accommodate. The current utility system can accommodate some growth. Yeah, there will be some new subdivisions in the future, but we're not looking at wild expansion. It's growth at a neighborhood scale. So there will be growth. There'll be hopefully smaller scale. What that means, that still needs to be determined. Well, the market will determine that. And the other thing that gets lost in translation here is this plan is a representation of what folks in the community, hope this community can achieve in the time frame of the plan. It's not a race. There's not a deadline that this has to be satisfied and all this completed. There's a good chance a lot of it won't be completed because stuff happens. Nobody saw 2008 coming, but we all suffered from it. So, I think you need to take a step back, realize that this is a long-range plan. Some of it will be achieved, not all of it. And with the consultant's recommendations and guidance, we're directing the growth where our investment in infrastructure has already been made and can accommodate future growth. That's what the plan represents.
Sir, we're not getting that information from the village. We have been told that 88 to 47, we want it now. We want it now. We're not.
Well,
And we don't.
Town has it on their website is available for commercial already, so why would they put it up if it's not available?
Well, again, there's a massive investment that's been made in the tollway and the interchange, and we want to leverage that for economic development purposes.
But we don't want it. We like it the way it is.
Understood. Understood.
I have a question. I wanted to follow up a couple things that were raised earlier. When we go back and start talking about the areas that are not currently in the village, and you talked about annexation, did I hear you say that you would not annex anything unless the property owner wanted that to happen?
Yes, that's always been the village's policy.
So you would never annex without their, if they wanted that to happen?
Well, I can't speak for future boards, but that is the current policy.
They need the question repeated.
Oh, the question was, would the village annex any property against the property owner's wishes? And the answer is no.
Who owns that property? I'm speaking
Well,
right now, but
I'm just talking generally, not about a specific property. As the consultant indicated at the start, we're not here to talk about a specific property, even though it's in this plan. They haven't presented us a proposal yet. You know, yeah, I mean, they're out there, but that's a zoning process. And all your concerns about traffic, the impact on stormwater drainage and the water and all of those things, the view from the road, those are zoning decisions, not in the comprehensive plan.
They say in the plan, but Jen Conan openly talks about a refueling station, a truck stop.
That's
So don't tell me.
it's less than half a mile
Don't
from
tell
my
me
well
people
that I
can
finish
walk.
water on.
There's gotta be some kind of an idea. Obviously, a lot of people are here from Elburn. I am from Elburn. My house is literally gonna be staring at this gas station or truck stop or something. I need some kind of an idea. Is this like, I mean, this whole hour has been about entertainment, dining, everything, retail, and so that's great. But so I was told that this was gonna be about town development, specifically about everything that they have bought and not bought. Are we gonna have any kind of idea, or at every meeting I'm gonna show up to, it's like, well, I don't know, there's no plan, there's gotta be something.
Alberta's getting screwed on this.
Well, I'm sorry you were told this meeting was about Crown.
Right. And I am in Nottingham Woods too, and this has been nothing about improvements there, and now there was 5 minutes on all the crap that you're gonna build across 4 and 7, warehouses and stuff that are just gonna be a nightmare. It's not gonna happen.
I have some comments for the consultants, actually. So I understand that this comprehensive plan really, for our economic developers, should be and serve as an advertisement to developers to come here and build stuff and spend their money. Now, that being said, our first problem is, one, we're in Illinois. That's our first major fight against it. Our second is, as Jen pointed out last week, we have a declining number of residences, right? It's terrible, but it's true. We still have continuing and increasing needs of infrastructure, of our schools. I mean, Dr. Layden wants 57 million, so we'll talk about that at his meeting next week. But I guess in this comprehensive plan, I get it. It needs to be written as an advertisement that our economic developer could use to help shop and bring people willing to spend money here and develop things. But I have a couple of things on land use priorities. You had a slide on that said, in the bottom bullet on the land use priority slide says leverages existing infrastructure. But yet the previous 10 minutes you lectured us on how our water is running out. So that's a conflict. I'd like to bring that up to you that needs corrected somehow in your planning and presentation. You also stated that you're not encouraging traffic congestion, but yet you want new retail mixed in with 12 people per acre housing. Is that what I understood? 12 people per acre? Okay, so you're envisioning a large condo building right next to the railway station, something of that nature? Because, I don't know. I guess the reason why I bring this up is you also stated later that automobile use is primary and it's not going to change for a long, long time. So I'm confused. Let me finish, please. I'm confused, and I'd like maybe just to give you some input into the plan. Is that, okay, so we want to have all this quaint little retail shops and restaurants in this concentrated area, but where the hell are we going to park? So, because automotive is still going to be primary. So that's my input to your plan, because they don't add up to me. So moving on, concentrating the commercial growth in those two little pockets, again, now I do agree 100%. Transit service locations need designated now. And I hope that means bus stops and a parking lot for the train station. But I did not get the drift that you were considering transit and bus. It was primarily just the train station. So, because we do have a special needs community in this town that would probably utilize that if we had eventually have bus service. So I'd like to understand why you neglected to put a bike path or a sidewalk from the north end of Bliss Road down to 47. And there's plenty of other trails all over that one main corridor kind of got missed. So I'd like you to look at that, please.
Yeah, sure.
And then why on earth are we proposing so many more traffic lights on Route 47? Like, really? I mean, come on. Now, I'm not a proponent of roundabouts, but why do we need that many traffic lights added? I just don't see it. What's that?
There's two traffic
You have
lights.
like 5 dots up there.
So those are improved crosswalks, the pink are improved crosswalks. So two traffic lights total.
So that's my input, hopefully somewhat constructive and not condescending. Not here to stop trial tonight. I know that's not your role or your job, but please take that input as some things I kind of see that don't add up in your plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From what I'm hearing, it seems to me that there's a lot of people with a lot of concerns. We haven't had a meeting to recognize these people who want to make these concerns, and I think that's the frustration you're hearing here. I understand that your agenda here is quite different from what the concerns are, but that's the miscommunication that has happened in this community. That's what we've got to get here, so that the people who have concerns about where they live and what's going to happen with those areas, they need to be heard.
Absolutely.
And they need to speak and get their voice out there so that they have something to hang on to in terms of being able to affect this situation.
Thank you for that comment, and hopefully tonight's meeting would alleviate some of those concerns about transparency, et cetera, that some of the people here have been concerned about. I also want to note that the library is closing in 10 minutes, so we'll all have to go, but we're happy to receive your comments because all this information will be on the website, and we'll tell you in a second where to find it so that you can add your comments, give us your feedback. Great, thank you very much.
Oh, you